Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers Podcast. And we have another guest today. His name is Dr. Nayan Patel. He's a pharmacist and an expert, it seems, in glutathione and maybe the oxidative stress we put on our cells and tissues. And we're going to do a deeper dive into glutathione, what it is, how it's regulated, and the significance of it. So, Dr. Patel, welcome to the Thyroid Answers Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
So as a pharmacist, like your background is, most people would think this is the guy that's providing medications based on a prescription, right? And here we're talking about glutathione, which is typically not, as far as I know, a prescription medication. And you're now more in the wellness space. So how did you go from pharmacist to more wellness-based care?
Oh, that started well before 25 years ago when I first got out of the pharmacy school, went into my independent practice, and very quickly I realized that we have all these medications in my pharmacy. It was not solving any problems. Back in 1995, 1996, there was this term revolving around the pharmacy world that, hey, we got to help patients with the medication management. So it used to call medication therapy management. The word, it says management. Nobody talks about getting rid of drugs. All they talk about is, can we manage people's medications for the rest of their lives? And so I quickly put two and two together and said, hey, we're not going to solve anybody's problems. All we're going to do is manage people's problems. And so I said, this is not a good deal for me for longevity as a business person, right? It wasn't appealing to me. And so I started digging into being a functional pharmacist, and I started my own journey is to become a compounding pharmacist and start doing some functional medicine. And long story short, we are here today, 27 years later. I'm still a pharmacist. I still have a pharmacy, but I hardly go there. I'm spending most of my time in research and development and educating people about the powers of nutrition, exercise, diet, healthy aging, healthy lifestyles, things like that.
So I think that's awesome. And I think maybe something you said I think is important, right? So from an allopathic perspective, and I came from that world, so I think I can talk both sides. But from an allopathic perspective, I think you're right. The focus of allopathic medicine, and sometimes they get bashed a bit from the functional medicine side, is like, what are they doing? They're not looking at it deep. They're not looking for root cause. But that's really not most of the training in allopathic medicine. The allopathic model is, what's the disease? What's the thing I need to manage or treat, and not really get into root cause issues. But that's, I don't, originally I had a problem with it when I was in that. And then I came to functional medicine and I was like, what are they doing? And now I fully realize, as you grow a little bit older, maybe you get wiser, that they just have a different job than we
Yeah.
should be doing in functional medicine. Our job is not management of symptoms with supplementation, which unfortunately sometimes happens in this industry.
Mhm.
Our job is to really help the patient understand that, hey, between diet, lifestyle, habits, behaviors, physical fitness, emotional stuff, these are the things that drive altered function. I often use the term allostasis versus homeostasis. They
Mhm.
drive us from homeostasis to allostasis. And this long-term chronic allostatic regulation then drives overload, dysfunction, and disease. And then we have the symptoms. So are you along the same lines of thinking that, hey, there's two different jobs here? Like, I don't ask my electrician to run my plumbing. I don't ask the plumber to run the electricity. So in somebody going to an allopathic physician, they may not, if they want functional medicine, they're really asking sometimes the wrong person for a strategy that they can't apply.
And yes, and the thing is, I don't think that they don't have the capacity to do so. What they're lacking is either knowledge sometimes the time, and sometimes it's the barriers they have put against themselves because they're in a healthcare model where they are only getting paid for taking care of the immediate issues, but not looking at the body as a whole. And so the insurance payer model is not actually helping providers to practice real medicine. Rather, they are being paid to take care of the issues and get them out of there. So you will pay you for 10, 15 minutes for a time frame. Just take care of the issues and let them go on their own. And so I think the healthcare system is fragmented. Even the best intended physicians, if they're in a system like that, where the payer model does not allow them to do anything beyond that, they're not going to spend the time and the energy to learn.
Yeah. There's not too many ICD codes for, wellness-based things, right? Uh, so unfortunately, everything needs to match to a diagnosis. And if
That's
the
right.
diagnosis wellness, the insurance company's like, why are we paying for that? That's not really what our business is, our business model is. And I would say maybe it's not as profitable to them as what we do, but that's okay. I think when it comes down to brass tacks, if you want healthcare, you've got to be invested in it, not your insurance
Right.
company.
That's absolutely right. I always tell my patients that, hey, your health is your health. Insurance company is in the business of making money, and the only way they make money is if they keep you sick the whole time. And so,
Yeah,
if
management of illness is big
being,
business for sure.
yeah, being healthy doesn't, nobody makes money. Not the food company, not the insurance company, not the doctors. Being healthy is cheap, but nobody makes money on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about glutathione, since that's your jam, right? So can you explain to the listeners what is glutathione? Why is it important?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about what first, and the why is the why I'm doing this thing today. So in the simplest term, glutathione is it's basically three amino acids coming together. It's a tripeptide. It's not a protein. We don't consider them as a protein. It's just a small fragment of peptide, but it is by far the most powerful ingredient that a body produces in turn to defend its to defend a body. The three amino acids that are coming together are glycine, glutamine, and cysteine. It's not that important, but the important part is that once you know what amino acids they are, your body can produce it naturally as long as there's three amino acids inside your body. The why I'm interested in this one is because it is the most abundant molecule produced in the human body. The amount of glutathione we have in the human body is the highest of any other ingredient that our body produces. And that's why when I first started looking at a pharmacy, I was getting projects to work on vitamin C and CoQ10 and astaxanthin and all those PQQ and all those molecules are coming to me. And I said, why can't we work on glutathione? Oh, it's too hard. It's been heavily studied. Nobody's ever figured out how to actually get this thing done. Uh, so that's my why. I said, okay, if that's the case, I have nothing to lose. I'm not going to swim with everybody else. I'm going to swim upstream. And says, you know what? I'll just take on a project on my own. If I succeed, great. If not, I still have a pharmacy job that I'll keep on continue doing my work. But I took on the project of working on glutathione for the very reason because the one molecule can change the trajectory of how a healthcare system is today.
So where's glutathione found? Where in the body? Is it in the blood? Is it in the cells? Is it in all the cells and tissues? Where is it
Yeah.
located?
I mean, it's in every cells in your body has glutathione. I mean, we're talking about organs and eyes and skin and every single cell has it, but it's in the mitochondria. So the question has always been, how can I increase a product that is actually produced intracellularly inside the mitochondria? Because nobody's ever figured that portion out as of today. So that was a thing that it's most abundantly produced everywhere in the body. Uh, every cells have it. So the question is, can we make a difference by uh, improving that?
So I guess that then begs a question, like, why do we need to make it
Exactly.
better? If the body does it anyway, and why do we need to add more?
And Eric, you're absolutely correct, right? Most of the people are fine. They don't need glutathione. They have a I mean, as long as they have a diet that is rich in cysteine and glycine and glutamine, the body can produce enough glutathione. There's a very small subset of people that have a gene defect or gene SNPs or whatever you call them, a gene mutation, that the body cannot conjugate those three amino acids together. And those will show up very early on as some sort of spectrum disorder, some sort of diseases that the body cannot produce glutathione. But that's very early on, very small percentage of people. Don't get me wrong, not all autistic people or Asperger's patients have glutathione deficiency. It's a very small subset of people. They may have this condition where they cannot produce glutathione, but otherwise, most people are fine. They are just fine. Here's the problem. Right about age 30 is what we have figured out in my findings, and of course, mine was very small findings. Our body's ability to produce glutathione and our body's actual need of glutathione, there's a discrepancy. We need a little bit more glutathione than our body is able to produce, and that's because of 30 years of maybe exposure to toxins and chemicals, and maybe at the age of 21 you started having some alcohol here and there, maybe high stress levels, maybe you had a pregnancy and you had a kid already. So your stress in your body, exposure to toxins, is now somehow accumulated to a point where your body's needs and what your body can produce, there's a discrepancy in there. And that's the first sign that, hey, maybe I should figure out a way to change my diet and see if I can become healthier and support the body to be the deal with all this toxins that we expose to on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I agree. And we started talking about this a little bit offline before we got online. And this is kind of the premise of what we were talking about, is that, hey, we as we go through time in life, we create a greater load on our system. And when we create a greater load on the system, at some point we can start to overload what the body can do and maintain our, what we call our homeostatic regulatory system. And now the stress becomes excessive. The body starts trying to upregulate the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant systems to deal with the excessive stress. And then we wind up not being able to meet the capacity. So it's all these stressors that we wind up putting on ourselves that then contributes to too much load, too much inflammation, too much oxidative stress. So glutathione is the body's major antioxidant, does a ton of great work. But if it's deficient, there's a stream of processes that make glutathione. Why not even go further upstream? NRF2 is the body's real major antioxidant, detoxifying antioxidant, anti-inflammatory master gene. Why not go even higher and support NRF2? Or do you think that NRF2 is fine and the problem is somewhere downstream?
So again, we do not know where the issues are. As a pharmacist, I'm always looking at products as to what kind of elements can I bring. I can introduce them, and so there are three schools of thoughts, right? One is you take exogenous antioxidants like vitamin C or vitamin E, they're not produced endogenously, so body doesn't produce those, but you take those in the hope that they will somehow reduce the oxidative stress down for you. The second issue is, I think, if that's not an option, that's the only option you have, that's good, but it's not going to be the best option. The second option is you make or you give direct products like CoQ10 or glutathione, which are actually used to reduce oxidative stress down completely. The third option is you can work on the enzymatic pathways like glutathione peroxidase or SOD, things like that, to basically work on the enzymatic process, and of course the NRF2 and all those pathways have been activated to deal with the antioxidant. Again, we can do any of all of them, one of them, or none of them. It's all up to us as to what we want to do, right? So the goal has always been is to, hey, how can we reduce oxidative stress down? We don't reduce oxidative stress down to zero because that will be actually very detrimental to our health. So we cannot
Absolutely.
do that. It's a Goldilocks effect. Too much oxidative stress is not good for us, can kill you. Too little, or actually too little is okay, but zero is actually bad for you. It's the same effect. And so how do we regulate the oxidative stress with an exogenous products, right? And to keep this in check. So I agree with you that hey, if there's a way to modulate NRF2 or modulate SOD or glutathione peroxidase enzymes and all those pathways, if we can somehow modulate those things correctly, then we won't need products to deal with it. But the question has always been, how in the heck do I modulate a human body system that is so integrated that is very difficult for us to do from an outside perspective? So as a pharmacist, I cannot wrap my head around it as to how do I deal with it. So then I figure out, okay, if I give you a product, and I can make SOD, I can make glutathione, I can make CoQ10, things like that. And if I can somehow figure out a way to improve the level to high enough, not super high, not over physiologic dosages, just high enough so I can get in the sweet spot most of the time. Am I going to be there all the time? Probably not, but I can be there most of the time and gives the body the chance to stay in the zone of very little oxidative stress, so the body is actually being resilient and not getting broken down. So that has been my thinking for all along this time.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that a little bit because I want to talk about downstream mechanisms and delivery mechanisms and things like that. But I think before we get there, we talked about glutathione is a major antioxidant. Um, and what somebody might do as they listen to podcasts, and they often do, and I see these patients in my practice all the time, they listen to a podcast and they say, Dr. Patel or Nayan is talking about glutathione, how good it is. I'm going to add that to my regime. And I wind up seeing people coming in, they're on 42 different supplements because every podcast they listen to, they just add it. And they don't realize that maybe one of the things that's driving a lot of their chronic conditions is the 42 supplements they're trying and
Oh,
manipulate
absolutely.
physiology. So I think maybe we should start with, we talked a little bit about potentially why somebody might be deficient. They've got more stressors coming onto their physiology. It's increasing free radicals and oxidative stress, and glutathione can help with that. But how would they know that they have a deficiency in glutathione? What are some of the key, maybe let's talk maybe signs and symptoms, let's talk maybe conditions, and then we can maybe talk what labs somebody might look at to be aware.
Yeah, I mean, the labs are easy. Just do a blood draw and it will tell you what the levels are. But again, that's an arbitrary number because honestly, what you're really measuring is the oxidized glutathione levels in your body. Doesn't give you the reduced form because there's no lab test that's out there that can do real-time testings in front of a patient to give you the exact levels of glutathione correctly. So it has to be done in a research institute only. So that's going to be the downside to that. But again, forget the lab. Let's talk about signs and symptoms. So the early on, when I first see that part is, I always go back and say, hey, what do we need to make glutathione? 3 amino acids, we were talking about it, 2 enzymes, 2 molecules of ATP, and 1 molecule of NAD for electron transfer. That's what we need to produce 1 molecule of glutathione. So what happens is that if your body is overproducing glutathione or is trying to produce as much glutathione as possible, it is using up all your reserves on ATP and NAD. So patients are feeling lethargic and tired. Now, fatigue is a common symptoms for everything out there? Yes. Is it specific to glutathione? Not at all. But that's the first sign and symptoms. Second thing is that the highest amount of oxidative stress in your body is in your brain. Brain consumes 20% of all oxygen you breathe in. The neurons in your brain are firing up at a multi-million miles per hour speed, produce high endogenous oxidative stress is the highest in your brain. And so if you're having those senior moments at the age of 30, that's, hey, yeah, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. the creepy forgetfulness kicks in, and we always say, "Oh, just you just have too much things on your on your mind. I just got this new job, or I just had my second child at this point. I'm just have too many things on my plate. I'm trying to do every single thing, and my brain is not firing on all cylinders." So that's what happens up. Now, oxidative stress, as it starts increasing, the inflammation starts increasing in your body. It on its own doesn't mean a whole lot of things, but now you have aches and pains in your body, your joints not functioning properly, things like that. But then you attribute that to, oh, I'm too busy, I don't exercise anymore, I'm not drinking enough fluids in my diet. And so there's all the stories have been made up for all these years on why things are the way they are as we age. But going back is that, hey, are we optimizing our glutathione levels to make sure our oxidative stress levels are low, right? Are we having the right diet, or are we doing the right amount of exercise? Not too much or too little, because exercise is basically, I have a lot of athletes that I work with, they consume a lot of oxygen. If they're runners, they're just breathing in so much oxygen. And after they're done with the run, oxidative stress in this individual is extremely high, right? For a few for a few hours. That has to be quenched. If they don't quench it, they cannot work out the next day. So athletes, when they're in the 20s, I mean, they can do whatever they want to do, and then next day they're ready to work out again. The same athlete, the same quarterback at age 25, and now he's at 35 years of age. He needs help, right? He cannot train as hard as he used to train at the age of 25. He cannot recuperate as fast as possible. So all this is leading up to high amount of oxidative stress in the body that we need to basically figure out how to quench those free radicals. We can talk about the disease states. 80% of all diseases today in the world are linked to oxidative stress as a secondary cause of diseases. And so do we want to wait until the disease happen? Because once you cross the line of being a disease, there's no coming back. You can be disease free, but when the conditions are bad, they come right back to disease again. For example, if somebody is diabetic, and by helping reduce oxidative stress down, they become diabetes free. As soon as the conditions, like even one little minor surgery on the knees, for example, boom, they're back to diabetic again. So even slightest stress, they become diseased again. So the key is, I don't want patients to wait until they're diseased. Can I get them disease free early on? So that way they don't have to worry about how to deal with diabetes or high cholesterol or triglycerides or, God forbid, cancer or any of those diseases that comes along.
So are you looking at people, because we're talking about some people can't do it, other people or can't generate it appropriately genetically. For other people, it's diet and lifestyle driven potential problems. And so then are you looking at glutathione supplementation as an everyday supplement for the average person?
So keep in mind, glutathione also recycles itself. So the body has a recycling method of recycling most of the glutathione if it's only quenching free radicals. So for oxidative stress related free radicals that are created, those free radicals, the glutathione will quench the free radicals, become oxidized, and the oxidized glutathione is actually stable in your blood. You can measure those levels. And with the help of vitamin C or sunlight or any of the energy sources, it can make it to glutathione again. So 50% of the glutathione is recycled. So the need for glutathione is actually not that much, right? The other 50% of the glutathione is actually used for detoxification pathways, mostly conjugation pathways. That means it is helping bind to known metabolites or bind to alcohols to get rid of these known chemicals that we ingest or we come in contact with or we get exposed to, and help reduce those toxicants out of your system. That is a one-way process, and that's the glutathione we had to replace again, or we had to produce again internally. And
But
so,
even but
anyway,
even to recycle it, right? We need other micronutrients and other pathways to support that
that's right.
recycling process. So is it possible that somebody who's taking exogenous glutathione in an effort to help them, and they have this immune, inflammatory, oxidative stress going on, that potentially some of the other key nutrients that are needed to recycle the glutathione appropriately aren't available, or we're putting more stress and strain maybe on an SOD system that's not functioning well to begin with, and now we can't recycle it, and now that oxidized glutathione isn't getting recycled and becoming part of the problem.
And that could happen very well. When we measure the glutathione levels in my patient population, what we are seeing is the total glutathione level. We don't know how much is oxidized, how much is reduced. And that's a problem. That is actually a problem. So in my research, when we did this human patient trials at the university, we were measuring like more than half of them were med students that we tested, and their levels were just right on, right? Oxidized and reduced form of kind of 50-50, which was perfect. That's what we want to see. But the older professors that were in the clinical trials that I have, they had a very high levels of oxidized glutathione and very low levels of reduced glutathione.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me realize that as we are aging, we are actually storing, or we have a lot more oxidized glutathione in our body than the reduced form. Now, is it because of accumulation of glutathione that we're not getting rid of it, of the oxidized glutathione, or is it that the oxidative stress is so high in this patient population that everything is getting oxidized very, very fast? We do not know the answer for that one yet, because most of the professors that we tested were otherwise healthy human beings, so they had no diseases or they had no conditions that told us that, hey, they're disqualified from the study. So these are otherwise healthy human beings, but we did see a higher levels of oxidized glutathione into the bloodstream. So again, we do not know that part answer yet. What we do know is younger patients have a good ratio of oxidized to reduced glutathione. As you start getting older, the oxidized glutathione level starts rising, the reduced form stays lower. And so the key is, can I work on getting more of the reduced form of glutathione into the body? Or is it possible for me just to take vitamin C and convert some of the oxidized to the reduced form? But right, even the overall levels is also dropping dramatically. So even though the oxidized was higher, if you combine both the reduced and the oxidized, the level was less than 50%.
So from a lab's perspective, there are potentially some things that we might look at. I don't know that if you do that as well, but maybe let's talk about them a little bit. One of those is homocysteine, is a blood test that can be done, and homocysteine is kind of a precursor to glutathione production.
Yep.
So do you find that in running homocysteine levels that there's any correlation with glutathione levels in the body?
So homocysteine is a defense mechanism, I think. It is activated because oxidative stress is higher. And so when you activate that, homocysteine levels are increasing. Does it increases glutathione level on the other side? That part we have not studied yet. I've not studied that portion yet as to, hey, if you have high homocysteine level, is also increasing glutathione. In theory, it does make sound like it's supposed to. That's the mechanism it's supposed to be added, but we have not done clinical trials to back that information. One thing we do see is that homocysteine levels are consistently higher in patients with metabolic disorders like high triglycerides, or patients with type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes for that matter, autoimmune conditions. So that those are the people that we targeted to supplement glutathione to see if we can, first of all, change the course of the disease that they have. And by doing so, does the homocysteine level goes down. And quite frankly, the homocysteine levels does go down, but before that goes down, we see a dramatic reduction in the insulin resistance of the triglycerides and things like that if the homocysteine levels are coming down. So that part we have done some studies on that one.
Yeah, so I would think about this maybe a little differently. And for the patients, when we're thinking about homocysteine's everybody makes homocysteine. Everybody should be making some
Yep.
homocysteine, and it can be either driven down the transsulfuration pathway to make more glutathione. It can be recycled in the methionine cycle to make more of what we call methyl donors to support methylation um, reactions. Um, but I would think along the lines that if the homocysteine is elevated, we're likely going to have potentially lower glutathione production because the homocysteine is not going down that pathway. I don't know if you've seen any correlation there. And the person I'm more concerned about, the other person I'm really more concerned about too, or that I might think that there's, I think we have to take a lot of things into consideration, but I'm concerned about both high and low ends. The person who has really low homocysteine, I'm worried about them. Like, do they have enough homocysteine to go down that transsulfuration pathway potentially and support glutathione production? And if it's low, where's it low? Is it low because their mitochondria is really dysfunctional and they have too much adenosine building up and kind of blocking that pathway? Is it low because they are driving it down the glutathione pathway, but at the consequences now my methylation capacity is
Reduce.
compromised because
Yep.
I'm not recycling it. So I think the high or the low from a homocysteine standpoint, we can interpret it either way. Like there's not enough to make it if it's low, or if it's low, maybe it is going that way as a part of the adaptive response. Like that's the most important thing I need to deal with from a cell perspective. Um, are you familiar? I know there are a couple labs that do methylation panels and look at the reduced and the oxidized form, and then look at the transsulfuration pathway metabolites. Have you used any of those in your studies?
What kind of labs are you talking about? Do you have?
There's a lab out in New Jersey. It's called HDRI Labs.
Mhm.
I can't think of the doc, but his name. But he's got a methylation. They have a methylation panel and a methylation extended panel.
Uh-huh.
They'll look at the folate cycle metabolites, the methionine cycle metabolites, and the transsulfuration pathway, and look at all of those to kind of see where might some of that blockage or compromise be that may be affecting levels. So it's an interesting test. I didn't know if you'd run it at all and seen how that correlates with what
No,
you're
I
doing.
have not. I have not. So most of my labs that I have run uh, is in the university setting. It's on just in human trials. So those are very highly regulated by the IRBs as to what we can test, what we cannot test. So
Mhm.
that's what we are actually doing. The doctors that I work with, they are doing some testings and they're in the functional medicine space. So they are looking for outcomes. So they're doing more outcome-based studies. For example, they're measuring ApoB, they're measuring oxidized cholesterols, they're measuring triglycerides, and the secondary effects of oxidative stress is what they're actually measuring. What you are asking is, are they measuring actually the methylation pathways and all those things? And those I've not worked with those physicians yet.
So when we're talking about um, taking glutathione or a need for glutathione, there's some discussion about how we're going to get it, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about food a bit, like, hey, food, you need, maybe that's a great place to start. Like we need to be able to consume the nutrients to be able to put it in there, and hopefully we take nutrients hoping that, like, thinking it emotionally, like we can direct which way these nutrients go. We really don't have that control, but the cells are going to do with those nutrients what they determine. But if somebody wanted to say, hey, I want to have a diet that's going to support glutathione production, what are the key things that you would tell them from a dietary standpoint?
So the main thing they need is the three amino acids. Those are the building blocks for making all the tripeptides, right? So the main amino acids that we are lacking in our diet is polycysteine. We have abundance of glutamine in our diet. We probably have enough glycine in our diet, but what we are missing actually is cysteine. So if you can just put your favorite search engine, cysteine-rich foods, you can get your vegan options, your vegetarian options, and your carnivore options, right? So you can have the meat sources like chicken and turkeys and oysters and things like that on your asparagus and avocados and some of the cruciferous vegetables like that. And of course the whey isolates. And so you have all these options available to increase cysteine. And that I would say, regardless on if you take or don't take any supplementations, you got to have a cysteine-rich diet to begin with. And some of the cysteine-rich diets also can also give you enough methyl donors. So it also affects your methylation pathways as well for detoxification. So it's always a twofer that you're getting. So I would always suggest that you have a cysteine-rich foods. One of the product that has both cysteine, selenium, and glutathione peroxidase enzyme is Brazil nuts. That's one of my favorite nut to eat. But keep in mind, you can only eat more than 4 nuts a day because it has enough selenium that over time can accumulate in your body. So limit to about 4 nuts a day. If you're just eating once in a while, then it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to eat it every single day, just limit to about 4 nuts per day because they'll give you enough selenium, glutathione, peroxidase enzymes to produce your own glutathione. That's a complete way to produce glutathione itself. So diet is the number one thing. Second most important thing that you can do is avoid the toxins, avoid the alcohols, avoid exposure to toxic chemicals as much as possible. I mean, I don't just ask you to stop breathing. Don't put a mask on yourself because that's not going to do anything. But hey, if you're going to go out in the sun, you know what? Cover your body up a little bit, right? Sun exposure is great for your body, for vitamin D production, for glutathione production. It's great. About 10, 15 minutes a day, right? But not 3, 4 hours. Don't have to sunbathe it. So just avoid some of the issues that we have that can deplete a lot of the glutathione levels.
So the general discussion I have on the podcast and with clients is, I think the general rule is to focus on a whole food based diet.
That's it.
And limit the processed food consumption. And if you do that, in general, doesn't matter what condition you have, you're probably going to be healthier to begin with. But how important is the role of a lot of the processed foods? Maybe you can talk to this a little bit. How significant is the role of the processed foods, the oxidized oils, in inducing more oxidative stress and greater glutathione need from your standpoint?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. All right. So again, there's all the schools of thoughts that you should not eat any seed oils and they get oxidized and they're really dangerous for your health. And I'll tell you from right off the bat, do not eat anything that's rancid. That's for sure, right? You don't eat anything that's rancid oils, rancid foods, because those are basically, you are literally giving your body oxidative stress right off the bat. Saturated fats, monosaturated fats, um, are basically just feeding the body right there and there, right? So with oxidative stress. So if I'm not I don't say not to eat anything, but what I always say is that everything in moderation is all okay. Now, do I eat grapeseed oil? No. Am I going to get it once in a while? Am I okay with it? Absolutely, right? There's no the studies are very conflicting. There's no randomized trials that are basically saying that seed oils are extremely bad for you. But there's nothing that says that they're also good for you, right? So I would say that, hey, if it's not good for you, but if it's not terribly bad for you, if it's a once in a while, it's okay. It's okay. But then I like olive oil myself. So I prefer olive oil because that seems to have the best effects on it. So I just eat that one myself. Uh, do I eat leftovers? That's another question I asked. I said, I try not to eat any leftover foods also. They emit certain type of gas. They're already processing, and it's also not healthy for your body gut microbiome. Maybe not to do with oxidative stress, but it has to do with something else. So food is a tricky question. As I said earlier, it's just I don't have a clear answer as to which one will increase oxidative stress, other than the fact is that if you're going to eat foods that are going to metabolize or induce insulin load, or uh, anything that increases has a secondary effect of oxidative stress, is how to reduce those up, especially sugars.
Yeah, I'll jump in and tell
Yeah, please.
the listening audience, like my general opinion is nobody's going to be probably perfect, but I think 80% of the time you should be whole food based, and maybe 15-20% of the meals should be you can, good habit, whole food based, bad behaviors occasionally. But as a general rule, if you just focus on that, not worry about the food, the health, the problem is we have the health food wars going on. Which healthy food diet is better? The vegan, the vegetarian, the carnivore, like the Mediterranean, like which one of these is better? And in reality, they can all be good for different reasons at different times. But I think the general rule is reduce the processed foods, and you're probably going to be better. You don't even have to think that hard. If it's highly processed foods, probably not great for you. Um, have you done any work with you? You talked about olive oil. A lot of people are concerned about oils and cooking. And do you find, or have you done any research on the idea that when we cook with oils, which ones create less oxidative stress than the others? Some people are talking about smoke points, and if you're doing, any of the vegetable oils, even olive oil and avocado oil may not be the best for cooking at high temperatures. And maybe we should be using more of the saturated fats in cooking, maybe butter, ghee, maybe things like lard might be better off to prevent more of the oxidative stress.
And yeah, I mean, every oil has a melting point, or the rancid point, where it gets that, hey, if you cook beyond this point, it gets bad for you. I was not prepared for this question, so I didn't have all my
That's fine.
answers for you yet. But that's a good question, because every oil has it. I would talk to my wife about that one, because we have a rule in the house: we don't cook anything in the oils at all. We do use ghee, a lot of ghee in our house, except for my wife is lactose intolerant, so she cannot eat ghee either. So she puts a little bit of coconut oil in there. But it's just cooking in the oil, there's always a potential of you're going towards rancicity. And so uh, low temperature is great. If you're just sauteing foods really quickly, is okay. We don't need anything deep fried ever in my house, so that is not even a question for us. Uh, we don't have any seed oil, so to speak, in the house at all. Uh, and and so oils is very tricky, but I think maybe we can put them in the show notes for you guys as to which oil as what temperature. You should not go beyond that temperature. I think that's a great thing to put in there, but I can get that information for you.
Okay. So when we're talking about glutathione potentially as a supplement, we've kind of covered that glutathione is a major antioxidant. As we go through life and time and our stress load, we start to increase the oxidative stress, and potentially doing two things. One, reducing the stress load is probably top on the list, and we do that
Yep.
through better diet, better lifestyle, improving systems, gut health, and other things. Um, but if you're going to take glutathione, there is some discussion about delivery mechanisms and the most effective ways to get glutathione into the body and have it into a usable form by the cells. So obviously, at one point, I think people were doing some inhalation. People were taking it as a pill. People were taking, now there's liposomal versions. What have you found in your literature that shows to be the most effective way to get supplemental glutathione into the body appropriately?
All right, so let's talk about supplementation first, because this is where I reside pretty much. Uh, Only one FDA approved product in the world, which is NAC. to improve glutathione levels. It's still the only thing that has ever been approved by any agency in the world to improve glutathione levels is NAC. That means your body is relying on producing their own glutathione using a cysteine molecule from outside sources, and the body can use it up and produce its own glutathione levels. Being said that, over the last 140 years that we have known about glutathione, people have tried everything from injections to inhalation solutions to suppositories to eye drops to nose sprays to the liposome technology that you're talking about. And then what we have today is some completely different technology that is a topical version of glutathione. But before I go to the topical version, I will talk about all the other forms first, because it tells us why there was a need for a different supplementation for all this time. So when you take NAC, which is FDA approved, the body you're relying on your body's ability to take the cysteine, combine to glutamine and glycine, using 2-ATP, using NAD to produce glutathione. As you age, the enzymes, the energy, the NAD all starts decreasing. So the need for glutathione is, even though it's there, the body can only come up to so much, and that's the best they can do. So that's mainly used for some treatment options, but not actually doing anything for supplementations to the highest level for helping you reverse any of the oxidative stress damage that has occurred. So then the question came up. I said, hey, can I infuse those into the veins directly? And just to let you know, I was one of the compounding pharmacists that was making intravenous glutathione for over 20 years. But this is before my patents got approved, and I shut it down afterwards. But the intravenous glutathione, we think that, hey, it's all, you infuse it into the bloodstream, so it should be okay. But in reality is that glutathione has no receptors in your body to accept it. As I said earlier, it's produced in the mitochondria, and so in the mitochondria, it's either produced over there, but you cannot put it back in there, right? It doesn't work that way, and so there's no receptors.
Let me interrupt you for a sec. So for the listener, like what he's saying is, if you put it into the blood directly, a lot of molecules get in, they have to be transported somehow into the cell to have the effect, right? And that's a challenge we have with, especially if we have, if you prescribe to Robert Navio's cell danger response, that part of that cell danger response is stiffening of cell membranes. That would be one limiting piece. And then the other limiting piece is if it needs a receptor and a transport mechanism, there isn't one. Right. So how do we get glutathione into the system? So go ahead. I just want to make sure the listener understood that.
No, thank you. Appreciate that part. I get too carried away sometimes. I don't explain.
I do too. So that's fine. Go ahead.
And so the study was done in 1991 where they infused glutathione, and what they found out was between 5 to 15 minutes, everything is in your urine. But what happened was that in the same study is they're measuring cysteine, and they saw an increase of cysteine in about 90 minutes. And so what they saw was there was a bump in the glutathione levels later on in the body, not because the body was able to transport glutathione from the blood to the body, to the cells, but they were able to absorb the cysteine out of it and using cysteine to produce its own glutathione.
So the glutathione we were taking supplementally was getting metabolized.
Yep, break it down.
Now, so did we, I think you kind of led to that. So how quickly does that happen, that glutathione that we take intravenously starts getting broken down? Is that pretty quick process?
Between 5 to 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
It's very, very fast. It's very, very fast. It's because they didn't measure the urine after that. And within 15 minutes, they had 300-fold increase of glutathione in the urine, basically just going to pee it out, everything.
And that was actual glutathione they were seeing in the urine.
The actual glutathione.
Some of that glutathione was getting broken down.
Exactly.
And being able to get to the increase of cysteine, which then was able to get into the cells and tissues and get converted into glutathione.
So that was the first study in 1991. It was a long time ago. So I said, okay, so intravenous is not going to go there. So let's figure out a different technology. So we were one of the very probably few pharmacies in the country that actually made liposome technology products. We licensed the technology from the original patent holder that was making some pharmaceutical medications, and he wanted to come to the nutraceutical world and comes to me and said, "Hey, Nayan, can you make me some liposomal vitamin C?" I said, "Sure." How about CoQ10? So we said, "Okay, yeah, we can do that part." And so I asked him, I said, "Is it okay if you make some glutathione?" I said, "No, don't bother because it just tastes so bad. It smells so funny. Nobody's going to take it. So don't even bother doing that part." So uh, since we already had the technology, I made it anyways. And so for 2 years, I was selling those liposome products for glutathione. And sure enough, it did not work for one of my patients. And so, early on, when you're young and naive and stupid, you try to make bold claims that, hey, I can help you with all your oxidative stress because I have this new technology of glutathione and it will take care of all your problems. And if you don't see results right away, and then you get discouraged and you say, okay, move on to the next project. And so did I move on to the next project, which was the intravenous form of glutathione. But then in 2011, some researcher at University of Texas in Austin did a study, and they took 26 kids. Uh, 13 were given oral liposomal glutathione, and 13 were given the transdermal liposomal glutathione. Right? Both studies done, and sure enough, guess what? Zero glutathione was found in the blood cells. They saw an increase of all the amino acids, the cysteine and the taurine and the glycine, but they did not see an increase of glutathione in your body.
That was from the topical.
That's on the topical liposome technology and
Okay.
oral liposome technology. So they're both liposomes technology, either
no
one,
improvement. No
no
improvement.
improvement.
Glutathione levels.
So they did see an increase in cysteine. So
Again.
So
Yeah.
all we know is doesn't matter if you take orally, intravenously, topically of the liposome technology, nothing actually, the body just breaks everything down. And so what I had to figure out is that, okay, this glutathione molecule has to be completely different because any which way you present to the body's going to break it down, absorb the cysteine, and try to make glutathione from it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did not know that this was true back in when I first started my research. And so we were working on this topical version. Well, we were working on a stable form of glutathione. We did not know that it was going to be topical, by the way. We're trying to make a glutathione version that is the body can absorb it without getting broken down. So the whole idea is, can I somehow twist the formula, twist the glutathione molecule into the lab, and so the body gets so small, so compact that the body doesn't recognize it as a tripeptide, and it doesn't break it down. So we discovered this molecule in 2007. We used something called dextrins molecule, which is sugar molecules, use that to twist the glutathione into three-dimensional structure into small beads of glutathione. And when we did that part, it doesn't oxidize at room temperature. It was perfectly created into small dots of glutathione. And we thought, oh my God, this is amazing. We put it in the mouth and it tasted awful. I said, oh, geez, it's just nobody's going to take this one. And so we put it in the mouth. We didn't see a rise in the blood levels at all. I said, okay, this doesn't work. I said, why is it not rising, right? Because what's happening? And then we use it topically, the same product, and all of a sudden, guess what happened? We saw a rise of the glutathione levels into the blood cells within 15 minutes. And that was the first eureka moment for us back in 2007. Said, oh my God, this needs to be topical version in a different technology that the body doesn't recognize as a tripeptide, doesn't break it down. And then what we used was a transport mechanism like dextrins, because dextrins actually has a receptors in your cell to accept it by the mitochondria. And so we use the dextrin molecules to basically transfer the glutathione. The body takes it as is, and once it gets inside the cells, it opens up into the glutathione, opens up inside. And so that was the moment for us that, okay, this is the first technology that does that part. We applied for the patent applications, and we did get 7 patents as of approved as of today, worldwide patents to composition of glutathione and delivery in this manner.
So when we think about the, I just want to make sure I got this, and and I get the listeners getting it too. So the liposomal forms that you put on topically, took orally, didn't raise glutathione inside the cell. And one of the reasons we think that that's the case is because there's no transport mechanism in there. When you added the dextrins to it, it changed the molecule a bit, allowed for better entry. We got it into the bloodstream, but then the dextrin, does the dextrin change not only the entry into the mitochondria, but is there receptors for the dextrin to get it into the cell? Is that what you're saying? On the cell,
Yes.
on the plasma membrane of the cell itself, there's receptors to get it into the cell?
So every cell, the cell-to-cell communication happens through the lipid rafts. On the lipid rafts, there's something called ACE2 receptors, which accepts products to get inside your cell. So dextrin binds to the ACE2 receptors and actually can deliver glutathione inside your cell.
So
that's
for
how
the
we did
listeners, without the dextrin on there, the glutathione wouldn't block to those ACE receptors to get in. The dextrin allowed essentially it's like a locked door, and you have a doorman at your condo, and you got to get the doorman to open the door to allow you to get into the apartment, right?
It's like a Trojan
along those
horse.
lines. Yeah.
Basically, it's a Trojan horse, right? What's inside is what is glutathione is inside, but the outside is just a dextrin molecule, which is completely inert, by the way. All the ingredients inside the products are completely inert and have a GRAS status by FDA if you consume orally. This is a topical product, so it doesn't apply to that same status. It doesn't apply to topical products.
And I don't know if you can or are willing to answer this question, but essentially almost all of the glutathione-based products, besides maybe yours that you know of so far, what's happening, whether it's something they're swallowing that's supposed to be a glutathione supplement orally, whether it's a liposomal version, a topical version, or even there's people talking about the nanoparticles, that the nanoparticles help get it into there. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but essentially what all of these other delivery methods have done is only allow cysteine to be potentially more cysteine available. They're not actually raising glutathione directly. It's not the glutathione I take is becoming glutathione in the cell. It really needed this dextrin molecule to be able to be the Trojan horse to get it into the cell to begin with.
So Eric, that's absolutely correct. I believe so that all the products actually do work to raise your glutathione levels, but not because your body's absorbing it as is. Body's actually breaking down, absorbing the cysteine, using the cysteine to produce its own glutathione levels. I would love to see somebody do a clinical trial head to head using cysteine and any of these products and see, do you get the same levels or not? That'll be an ideal
your
study.
product, cysteine, or any glutathione product, see them head to head and measure mitochondrial function, right? Or measure what's going on with the electron transport chain. You could run like a mito swab and look at each phase of the electron transport chain with like a mito swab test and maybe see a potential change in each aspect of the electron transport chain, possibly, or maybe see changes in a methylation panel or changes in tough one with homocysteine because there's just so much variability there.
There's so much variability. So here's okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, if you did any, like, you actually answered the question before I asked it, because that was my next question was, have you done any studies to say, hey, here's our product, here's the liposomal form, and we can measure the difference in glutathione levels or other oxidative stress markers to show that, hey, this is more effective? Have the clinical trials been done for that, or not
So
quite yet?
there was one clinical trial done at the university, Western University School of Medicine over here in California. Uh, I'm uh, I'm an adjunct faculty over there, so I get a little bit of privilege to get discounts on the study, not free, of course. So I get a little bit discount. So it helps me to get a study done over there because everything that I do is self-funded. And so
Mhm.
money comes very tight when it comes to this kind of clinical trials, especially when you do human trials. It's very, very expensive after you do human trials. And so we did a 30-patient human trial. It was a 3-day trial. Okay. What do you expect in 3 days from any supplementation? Usually nothing.
Mhm.
3 days is not enough to concur to any results, right? So
Right.
here's what happened in 3 days. 3 days, what we wanted to check was, hey, do I increase the glutathione levels upon applying topically? That was my first thing. If I did so, if the answer is yes, then what effect does it have on oxidative stress markers?
Mhm.
And uh, and to get an IRB approval, one of the uh, professors at one of the board member of IRB asked them, I said, hey, if you're so good about glutathione, then why don't you measure the inflammatory markers and see if it improves macrophages to kill any infection? I said, oh, geez. I said, we're only doing a 3-day trial. I said, yeah, so what's the problem? I said, okay. I said, well, if that's the only way I'll get my IRB approval, I'll do it, right? So we said, yes, we will do that study as well. So in 3 days, we give 2 doses, one in the morning, one in the evening for 3 days in a row. So this is what we found out. First of all, increase of the RBC levels of glutathione and the PBMC levels of glutathione went up immediately within the first hour, and the peak was in 72 hours. It was very, very high. This was the reduced form because we had the technology at the university to draw the blood, put in the machine, and measure the levels of both oxidized and the reduced form of glutathione so we can measure those right away.
Mhm.
So that one was expected. I already knew that answers 15 years ago. So because when I first put patent applications, so we already knew the answer was true. What we did not know was how fast it reduces oxidative stress. So what we measured was MDA levels, which is melanaldehyde levels. We measured those, and those levels dropped within 4 hours after one application.
Mhm.
Apply one time, and the levels drop in 4 hours. That was significant for us. The second thing what they did was they we could not infect the blood with mycobacterium infection because of course there's no cure for it. So what we did was we applied the glutathione, we drew the blood, we infected the blood with mycobacterium inside a test tube, and we put them for incubation over 3 days. What we found out was after one application, after 1 hour, we drew the blood and used that blood to test for all the cytokines and infected the blood with the mycobacterium. We saw a rise of IL-2, IL-12, interferon gamma, TNF alpha, all the cytokines to improve T cells, natural killer cells, and improve macrophages to the point they saw a reduction in the Mycobacterium avium infection in the test tube. Let me remind you one more time. This was a 3-day trial. We saw the
Mhm.
results in 1 hour for all those things. And so that basically just solidified. I said, hey, if I can do that in 1 hour, in one day, what if somebody takes it for every single day for 1 month, 3 months, 1 year, 10 years for that matters? What can we see in this patient? So again, our long-term goal is to have as many people as possible. So we're collecting data at this time, but if we can see this in 1 to 3 days, is this much results. I just can't imagine any human being that would like to at least give it a shot to try it out. If I say, hey, you know what? Let me see if I see any benefit or not, right? Uh, but that's what we are seeing right now in terms of a very small clinical trials has triggered another 3 more trials right now. We are still contemplating all this IRBs right now to do 3 more human trials, but that may or may not happen in the next future. So we don't know that part yet.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like a pretty neat, almost pharmacologic effect, right? When we talk about supplementation and diet, and a lot of times people take supplements and they think that it's going to have like a pharmacological effect, like a drug is going to do. Drugs are really designed to have pretty immediate changes in the chemistry.
That's right.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, we know something like sulforaphane can get to the brain in like 15 minutes and have an impact, which is awesome. But most of the supplementation, as you said, it takes time. You're putting nutrients in, and
Yep.
we have this hope that if I take magnesium, it's going to do what I want it to do, but the cells may direct it in a different direction. I took calcium and it didn't do what I wanted to do, right? Because
Yep.
it laid down in my artery. It didn't do what I wanted to do. I wanted to build healthy bones. So I think it's really cool, really interesting. I'd also be really interested to see what the longer term studies are. But
Yeah.
what the listeners don't realize, he's saying these things are self-studied. The big challenge in the functional medicine space with nutritional things is these things cost tons of money to run these studies. And
Yeah.
there is, if you know, in pharmaceutical companies spend millions and millions of dollars in studies to make a product, and the average person who's developing a supplement line and something like you're doing, it's just not reasonable to try and do that, to do these expensive studies, at least early on.
Even for us, I mean, if you're doing a 30-patient trial, it's costing us $250,000.
Yeah.
Just as a base. So it is an expensive thing to do, but it is so important because consumers today are much more savvy than before. They are not buying what we are selling. They are very, very well informed, thanks to podcasters like you, those getting the good information out to them. And so the consumer today are looking for more data, and they want more information, making sure that everything is good. And so even though we discovered the molecule in 2007, we didn't launch the product to the public until 2020. Because the first 13 years is, guess what? I had to make sure that I've tried at least 50 to 100,000 patients in the past before I launched the product to the public. So through the pharmacy, we were working with physicians all over the United States and having patients try these products for almost 13 years before we actually formed a company to launch the public.
Yeah, so I guess that brings up a big question. If you're getting those positive results, how do you keep that from a pharmaceutical company coming in there and say, hey, we'll buy this from you and turn this into a drug?
They can very well do that part. That's what, I wish everybody gets a chance to read my book, The Glutathione Revolution. In the introduction, it tells my story on why I do this thing. I don't tell about all these things because I want to make sure people understand that my heart is in a completely different place. Glutathione has a potential on helping every human being on this planet. At the price I'm selling today, almost 90% of the people in the world cannot afford this product. The cost of making this product is extremely expensive. If this thing become a drug, the cost will probably go quadruple, if not 10 times higher what I'm selling it today. Yeah. Nobody's going to be able to afford this product if it has to go through a FDA approval route to be used as a glutathione. It's a simple glutathione molecule. So my goal is to reach the world, make this cost effective as much as possible, so everybody gets a chance to use it, apply it, and see the benefits of it. And so pharma companies, if they cannot make a profit on it, it's not gonna be that great for them. So I'm hoping that nobody comes to me and try to buy it off, because sometimes you have to make a deal with some devil just to stay alive sometimes.
Yeah. Or the other thing that could happen is somebody could offer to buy it from you and shelve it and say, hey,
that's another issue.
This is competition to these other products we have that are profitable, that are more that are managing things a little bit differently. And so, yeah, that's another possibility of things can happen, because that unfortunately does happen.
Eric, so you know about CoQ10, right? CoQ10 was bought up by pharmaceutical companies because CoQ10, when they first released the first statin drug, they found
Oh
out
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
everybody used statin drugs were depleting CoQ10 levels in the mitochondria, and people are having all this chest pains, all the cardiomyopathy, all this chest pains, leg pains, all the rhabdomyalgias. And so the company bought the rights to CoQ10, so no other product in the world can combine them together. So you're right. People buy products to shelf it, not to
Yeah,
sell it.
yeah.
It's just crazy. I hope I don't entertain any of those offers. I pray that I listen to my people, and I'm here to support them.
So I want to get a couple more questions in before we go, because this is a topic that when we talk about glutathione utilization, oftentimes there's a discussion, is this something that should be taken every day, or is this something that should be pulsed periodically? And I think potentially, now that we're talking about what happens, maybe the reason that people talk about pulsing it and why people may have issues is because cysteine can go in other directions. It doesn't mean that the cysteine that we take, that the glutathione we take, we metabolize, we get the cysteine, is necessarily going to increase glutathione. Cysteine can do other things as well that may potentially create an issue. So is the concern about taking glutathione, chronic use of glutathione as a liposomal, some type of a supplement or topical, where it's only able to get converted to cysteine? Does your product, is there a limitation to how much and how frequent it can be used without creating a problem?
That's a great question. It's a loaded question. Most consumers may not even understand that question, but I want to break it down to what I think is going to be very informational for them. You don't pulse eating food every day, right? You don't eat like, so, okay, I'm not going to eat food today, I'm going to eat food tomorrow, or maybe. So you rotate the variety of food because you want to get all the amino acids, all the building blocks of the body. When it comes to glutathione, there is no supplementation of glutathione except for our product that is actually getting absorbed. So they're all getting broken down. So all the old technology products, you can literally take it every single day. The body's just going to break it down anyways and just use up the amino acids into making glutathiones or making other building blocks, other peptides that the body needs. So when it comes to my product, Glutaril, there is a concern to me personally that, hey, if I am giving glutathione as ready to use product, do I need to be worried about taking it every day? And what's the consensus look like, right? So that question came to me 15, 20 years ago when I first discovered this molecule. And so we did a study back, I don't know, a long time ago, 2009, I believe that I did a study on that one, is to, hey, what is the half-life? How long does it stay in the body? What if I give you every single day? What is going to reach steady state? All those questions. Those are great questions that I had for myself. And as I said, there's a Goldilocks effect. I didn't want to ever raise the glutathione levels to be too high that you basically have zero oxidative stress. And I don't want it to be like just barely enough because, hey, your body cannot produce enough glutathione. I want to be the right amount. And so we figured out very early on that the dose required for this thing is a very, very small application. It's about 4 sprays, half an ml, which gives you approximately 100 and 110 milligrams of glutathione. At that level of glutathione, you're going to reach a steady state level or a high RBC levels of glutathione, not the highest, because I'm not worried about the highest, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm looking at high enough that, hey, eventually the body will start recycling 50% of it, and 50% will get destroyed. And over time, I'm going to be okay. So we figured out that if you do that one for about 4 to 6 months, that if you do it twice a day, every single day, that you will get anywhere from 18 to 20 hours of coverage of glutathione inside your body. You're not going to get 24 hours coverage still. So the question is, can I use it every single day after that? So in my mind, I'm thinking that, hey, you got to use it twice a day, every day for at least 4 to 6 months if you're otherwise healthy. If you have a disease state, you may never reach steady state for a couple of years, or if you do reach it, probably at least a couple of years out. But people with autoimmune conditions and severe metabolic disorders, people with cancers and high levels of oxidative stress patients, they may never reach steady state. But if you're otherwise healthy, you will reach steady state in about 6 months to a year. And can you get away with once a day applications? Probably, probably. So one example I have is actually two examples is my PhD on staff and my dad. My dad in his 80s and my PhD in his 60s. They were the first patient number one, patient number two that started using this glutathione 12, 13 years ago. But there's all early on, early adopters. My dad had no choice but to use the product because I told him to do so. My PhD had a choice. But anyways, so they've been using twice a day, every day for the last 13 years. Right. My dad unfortunately passed away this year, was a freak accident, and it was just unfortunate. But he was at the age of 89, he was in the best health ever. And I can tell you, at one point he had type 2 diabetes, he had arthritis, he had blood pressure issue, he had a stent put in one of his arteries because it was 100% blockage, and all these conditions. And right after his stent insertion, he started using glutathione till the day he passed away, and he was completely free of all diseases. And that to me was just told volumes that, oh my God, even at the age of 80, I'm able to help anybody reverse oxidative stress down and give a body the fighting chance to regenerate and recuperate. Now, he was not walking like a 20-year-old kid, but he was walking 6 miles a day at the age of 89.
So for the listener, I want to kind of, because we talk from the cell danger response, and you might be listening to what I'm saying here and saying, like, come on, right? Everybody produces a product and says it's going to do this or it's going to do that. And sometimes it's accurate, sometimes not. But the potential here is if there is higher levels of oxidative stress that you can't manage, and you can provide some more antioxidant support, and it can truly raise the glutathione levels in the cell, not just raise potentially cysteine levels, then by reducing the oxidative stress in the cell, you help with that cell danger response we're talking about. You kind of mitigate some of that potentially the oxidative stress inside the cell. The danger response can go down. Now you've got better T4 to T3 conversion. Now those metabolic systems can turn back up. Now glucose transport improves because the GLUT transporters work better with more T3. Metabolism improves. Mitochondrial function can improve. And so my understanding would be this is the mechanism by which this is helping. You're helping offset what the body is struggling to do because of the load coming in. It doesn't mean that you decrease all the healthy diet, lifestyle, all those other things, but it could be potentially be a tool to help manage certain conditions. So we are up against kind of the end of our talk here. I appreciate you coming on. Please give everybody some insight into, talk about what's the product, what's the name of the product, where could they potentially get it, and then you mentioned your book. So why don't you plug the book, and we'll tell people where to get that as well.
Absolutely. The book is The Glutathione Revolution. You can buy it from any bookstore you want. It's also on Audible. It's on digital format as well for really inexpensive pricing. My website is aurowellness.com, AURO wellness.com. People can get it from my website, or we only sell through practitioners, physicians. So if you are working with practitioners like yourself, they can get it from you directly as well, or through the website. Either way, the product is Glutaril. There's two products I have, the Glutaril and Glutaril Plus. The Plus version is just a stronger version of glutathione. We never discussed those issues out at all because guess what? There was an afterthought because my original studies were done on the regular Glutaril, which is a regular product. The Plus is when we have people who say, oh, I need more glutathione. The answer is no, you don't. But I'm not here to judge them. So I have a stronger version as well.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the question. And you said there's limitation to toxicity. I mean, that's my concern with a lot of different things when people are taking it. We have a tendency, especially here in the US, if some is good, a lot more is better. And that's usually not the case from a health perspective. Like just because something is good, it doesn't mean you should take a whole bunch more. It usually, moderation, as you said earlier, is probably the better strategy, and consistency versus pounding away with heavy doses to try and get a quick fix. So I'm going to we'll finish this up. I appreciate you coming on. I know I hit you with some questions that you weren't maybe quite thinking I was going to ask you. I still had a couple more, but I want to respect your time as well. So Dr. Nayan Patel, thank you so much for coming on the Thyroid Answers podcast.
Thank you for having me.